'cause I know that it's something real. Hey, hey, gotta say how I feel, 'cause I know that it's something real.
So tonight on Keeping It Real, yes, I'm from the Key Peninsula and I'm a photographer, so real is R-E-E-L. But this is also just, we all love stories, and story time is part of the reality that we love. Keeping It Real. Tonight on Keeping It Real, I again am heading to one of my favorite authors for this story. Tonight we are going into The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi by Chris Van Allsburg. Now, this was Chris's first book, and it was wildly successful. In fact, it was a Caldecott Honor Book. The Caldecott is a medal awarded to the best children's picture book produced in the United States in a year, in any given year. To have your first book out of the gate become a Caldecott Honor is pretty impressive. Of course, he went on for his second book to do Jumanji, for which he won the Caldecott. And then he went on to The Polar Express years later and many other books in between, and all of them fabulous. But tonight, we're going to enter the weird and wonderful and wildly strange world of the magical garden of Abdul Ghazazi. The illustrations are beyond beautiful. They're in black and white. They're a pencil type, almost charcoal type of things, but I think you're going to like tonight's story. The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. And he put this book out in 1979. Yes. Yes, I do have a signed copy. Oh. Let me move the cover out of your way and out of mine. There we go. 6 times Miss Hester's dog Fritz had bitten dear cousin Eunice. So when Miss Hester received an invitation to visit Eunice, she was not surprised to read, P.S. Please leave your dog home. On the day of her visit, Miss Hester asked young Alan Mitz to stay with Fritz and give him his afternoon walk. As soon as Miss Hester left, Fritz ran into the parlor. He loved to chew on the chairs and shake the stuffing out of the pillows, but Alan was ready. All morning long, he kept Fritz from sinking his sharp teeth into the furniture. Finally, the dog gave up and fell asleep, exhausted. I'm just going to give you a little bit bigger size on that picture. Yay! Alan took a nap too. But first he hid his hat under his shirt, hats being one of Fritz's favorite things to chew on. There's Fritz right underneath. Take a look. Background picture. An hour later, Alan quickly awoke when Fritz had bit him on the nose. The bad-mannered dog was ready for his afternoon walk. Alan fastened Fritz's leash and the dog dragged him out of the house. Walking along, they discovered a small white bridge at the side of the road. Alan decided to let Fritz lead the way across. Some distance beyond the bridge, Alan stopped to read a sign. It said, "Absolutely, positively, no dogs allowed in this garden." At the bottom, it was signed, "Abdul Ghazazi, retired magician." But the sign stood, behind the sign stood a vine-covered wall with an open doorway. Alan took the warning quite seriously. He turned to leave, but as he did, Fritz gave a tremendous tug and snapped right out of his collar. He bolted straight ahead through the open door with Alan running behind him. Uh-oh. See, and it's even the sign, even back then, capitals. No dogs allowed in the garden. "Fritz, stop, you bad dog!" cried Alan. But the dog simply ignored him. Down shadowed paths and across sunlit lawns they raced, deeper and deeper into the garden. Finally, Alan drew close enough to grab hold of Fritz. But as he reached out, he slipped and fell. Fritz barked with laughter as he galloped out of sight. Alan slowly picked himself up. He knew he had to find Fritz before Mr. Ghazazi discovered him. Bruised and tired, he hurried off in the dog's direction. After a long search, Alan was ready to give up. He was afraid he might never find Fritz. But then he came upon fresh dog prints. Slowly, he followed Fritz's tracks along a path that led into a forest. The dirt path ended with where the brick walk began. There was no more tracks to follow, but Alan was certain that Fritz must be just ahead. Alan started running. In front of him, he could see a clearing in the forest. As he came dashing out of the woods, he stopped as quickly as if he had run up against a wall. For there in front of him stood a truly awesome sight. It was the house of Ghazazi. Alan nervously climbed the great stairs, convinced Fritz had come this way and had been captured. The boy's heart was pounding when he arrived at the huge door. He took a deep breath and reached for the bell, but before he touched it, the door swung open, and there, in the shadow of the hallway, stood Ghazazi the Great. "Greetings, do come in," was all that he said. Alan followed Ghazazi into a large room. When the magician turned around, Alan quickly apologized for letting Fritz into the garden. He politely asked that if Mr. Ghazazi had Fritz, would he please give him back? The magician listened carefully and then, smiling, said, "Certainly you may have your little Fritzy. Follow me." And with those words, he went to the door and led Alan back outside. They were walking across the lawn when suddenly Ghazazi stopped by a gathering of ducks. He began to speak in a voice that was more like a growl. "I detest dogs. They dig up my flowers. They chew on my trees. Do you know what I do to dogs I find in my garden?" What?" whispered Alan, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I turn them into ducks," bellowed Ghazazi. In horror, Alan looked at the birds in front of him. Then one duck came forward. Ghazazi said, "There's your Fritz." "Impossible!" Alan begged the magician to change Fritzy back. Impossible, he answered. Only time can do that. This spell may last years or perhaps just a day. Now take your dear bird and don't come again. Then Alan took the bird in his arms. It tried to give him a bite. Good old boy, said Alan sadly, as he patted the bird on the head. You really haven't changed so much. With tears in his eyes, he started for home. Behind him, Alan could hear Gazazi laughing. As he approached the stairway, a gust of wind took Alan's hat sailing right off his head. Running along with one arm reaching for the hat, Alan lost his hold on Fritz, and the duck flew out ahead and grabbed the hat in midair. But instead of landing, he just kept on flying, higher and higher until he disappeared in the afternoon clouds. Alan just stood and stared at the empty sky. Goodbye, old friend, he called out sadly, sure that Fritz was gone forever. At least he had something to chew on. Slowly, one step after another, Alan found his way back to the garden gate and over the bridge. It was sunset by the time he reached Miss Hester's house. Lights were on, and he knew she must be home. With a heavy heart, he approached the door, wondering how Miss Hester would take the news. When Miss Hester came to the door, Alan blurted out his incredible story. He could barely hold back the tears. Then, racing out of the kitchen, dog food on his nose, came Fritz. Alan couldn't believe his eyes. I'm afraid Mr. Gazazi played a trick on you, said Miss Hester, trying to hide a smile. Fritz was in the front yard when I returned. He must have found his way home while you were with Mr. Gazazi. You see, Alan, no one can really turn dogs into ducks. That old magician just made you think that duck was Fritz. Alan felt silly. He promised himself he'd never be fooled like that again. He was too old to believe in magic. Miss Hester watched from the porch as Alan waved goodbye and hurried down the road to go home. Then she called out to Fritz, who came playfully running around the front yard. He came trotting up the front steps with something in his mouth and dropped it at Miss Hester's feet. Why, you bad dog, she said. What are you doing with Alan's hat? And that is the story of The Garden of Abdul Gazazi by Chris Van Allsburg. Yes. If you look carefully, the flowers in the chair here, some of them start to look like ducks. Other things. There's a lion here with a foot. Yes, Abdul Gazazi. A cranky old magician. With an interesting, spooky garden. It's a great book. It's a wonderful book. One of those that celebrates imagination. Who knows? Was it all a dream? Would it happen? Because you knew in the pictures and the details that he foretells in the story in so many different ways. Off she goes. And there's Fritz. But in this picture, oh, I'm on the wrong, you can't see. Here, if I go in closer, There's the white bridge, and there's the house. And that's from the scene where he's sleeping on the couch. It all starts someplace. And of course, Fritz. And I think, as I've mentioned before, Fritz appears again in almost, well, in all of Chris Van Allsburg's books in some way or another. In the Garden of, in Jumanji, Fritz shows up as a little pull toy. It's kind of hard to find in Two Bad Ants, but he's there. And in Ben's Dream, he's a picture on the wall. And in other places, I have to go back and look to see and find those. But that's always a fun thing to do, to search in those. So that is the story, let's see, of the Garden of Abdul Ghazazi. So thank you for joining me tonight. It's been wonderful to have you here and to have you join in on this story from afar. And I put one out every night, whether it's live or whether pre-recorded, but that's what I do for story and art and for keeping it real. And so until next time, I leave you with this. Keep looking for the beauty hidden in plain sight. It's all around you, everywhere. Look around, up, down, under. But I suggest the first place you go look is in the mirror. Until next time, take care.
In the heat of the night, we could get lost in all the lights and sounds. Feeling alright, we won't go home, we will just stay here downtown. There's not just stars on the boulevard, they're in the light in your eyes. Oh, we don't need no black cards, I just need you by my side. We could be shamed.